Cox Automotive published the Kelley Blue Book EV sales report in early July. Here to walk us through the report is Stephanie Valdez Streaty, who's the Director of Industry Insights at Cox Automotive. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for joining us on the show today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. I always enjoy talking about EVs and the crazy roller coaster ride we're on as we navigate.
It certainly is a crazy roller coaster ride. It has been that now for years. It was, okay, everybody's going all in on EVs and every OEM is changing their fleet to provide EVs, and they're changing the laws in all these states by 2035. And now the whole world has been turned upside down in EVs. So it's going to be interesting to talk to you about this report. That being said, how did EV sales perform in the second quarter?
Yeah, looking at Q2, it ended where we forecasted. In end of January or end of June, we forecasted about a 6% decline, and that's where it ended up.
Okay.
So about a 6.3 decline year over year. However, it was up 4.9% quarter over quarter. And so kind of what we've been talking about with the IRA, I think that's a little bit of the insight that there's probably these consumers who are thinking, I'm going to go ahead and get an EV while I can still get that IRA credit. So that's probably some of the uptick that we saw in Q2. And just to highlight, Tesla, as we all know, dominates the marketplace. They were down 12%. And so whenever Tesla, whether it's changes in prices or changes in sales, it impacts the overall market.
Right.
And if you pick out Tesla in Q2, it's pretty flat. But definitely Q2, you had some of the GM, like the Equinox was the shiny star that really did well in Q2 and brought up
nice car. Very nice car. So despite the wide range of availability and inventory and models, what factors led to the decrease in EV sales in Q2?
Yeah, I think with the EV market has that double whammy. Not only are the EV market having to deal with the political, regulatory, economic headwinds, but also it's a new technology, right? We're still in that early adopter phase, and so I think with those two things squeezing, it's really hard to navigate and move past those like barriers. Because right now, if you think about the top barriers for EVs, it's price. And we consistently have a price premium, probably around 10,000 on average for this year. And so I think until we can have more affordable EVs where that gap is shortened, that's going to be, a game changer. And also I think infrastructure too. So even though there's lots of models, there's, I think, over 75 models that consumers can choose from. But once again, we need more affordable. And so I think the political and economic regulatory headwinds, along with the transition, kind of are what's the forces against EV adoption and acceleration.
Yeah, there's no question. And we will see an increase, right, of sales. We've already seen them, as you alluded to earlier, and we should see that, probably for the foreseeable future, right, as consumers get concerned that they might lose out on a $7,500 tax benefit, right?
Right. I think that has been, the IRA incentives have been definitely a very effective selling tool for dealers. And then for consumers, it's a really good, closes that price gap that we're talking about. There's probably about 20 models that are actually eligible for the IRA clean credit to purchase the vehicle. But the area that's really going to be, I think, we're going to probably see a lot more leasing, and that's going to impact overall adoption going forward.
Right.
The EV leasing, as you've probably heard, is a loophole. With that, there's no MSRP or income or any of the battery requirements. And so we've seen leasing just uptick since that regulatory change was in end of 2022. And we've seen about 1 million EVs leased since that point. And that's about 60% of EVs are currently being leased. So that's definitely an effective tool for dealers to push during this time.
Yeah, I think consumers feel much more confident and comfortable leasing an EV than buying one for probably a multitude of reasons, right?
Yeah, you have I think a lower monthly payment, right? And then I think if you're not really fully committed to jump on the electrification boat, you get to test it out. If you're thinking there's new battery technology that's going to increase range, density, and also if you're worried about residual values, depreciation, I think that's something that really makes leasing attractive.
Yeah. And as one consumer friend of mine said, he goes, "I'm going to lease the EV that I'm going to drive here shortly," and And I said, why are you leasing? You always bought your cars. He said, because it's the value of this vehicle scares the heck out of me. If I put my money into trying to buy the car, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get out of it later. So at least this number kind of caps that and says the $600 or $700 a month that I'm going to pay for this EV, that's it. I'm not going to be stuck with a vehicle that I owe, $40,000 on and is only worth $20,000, or that scared them because of all of the press that's out there about that very issue, right?
Right. And I think the one positive thing about with EVs, it's all about the batteries, right? It's up to 40% the cost of the vehicle. So I think as we move further along this, and we have more trust and transparency around the state of health of the battery.
Yeah.
I think from a used EV perspective, or even buy a new one, having that confidence that that battery is going to last. Mm-hmm. The other interesting thing that we found in our surveys is that a lot of consumers aren't aware that there's a battery warranty. 100,000 miles, 8 to 10 years. And so I think from an educational perspective, if that was conveyed and consumers knew that, okay, if I buy this EV,
right, it's
going to last. And if there's something that goes wrong, I can take it in and get it replaced.
Right. Yeah, and I agree with you. I think they don't know that. I think that's one of the best kept secrets out there that we need to talk a lot more about, because I agree. I think that does cause some angst and some anxiety, I should say, about the whole EV experience for a lot of consumers, right?
Right. Yeah. I think that whole education piece is going to, and also too, I think just from a perspective, and this is more from a dealer perspective, but as a consumer comes in, understanding what their pain points are. Is it cost, or are they worried about charging infrastructure? And then even that price point, really being able to know, depending where you are there state incentives, local incentives that you can stack onto that current IRA federal incentive to really
good point.
Get that cost down. So I think that's something that dealers should really focus on. How do I convey that total cost if I can tap into some of those incentives?
Yeah, that's a very good point. The other thing that we've talked about here at CBT News is actually getting salespeople. Those are the people that are in the trenches on the front line, if you will, that actually meet those customers when they come in the door, or maybe they call the dealership before they come and they speak to these individuals. Many of those individuals don't drive EVs. They're not, the salespeople themselves are not in EVs. I think somebody said recently it was less than 15% of new car salespeople today actually drive EVs. Well, I will tell you, as a former salesperson and manager and running dealerships, that's a problem, because if you want to sell EVs, you first have to win the hearts and the minds of the very people that are actually selling the EVs, or should be selling EVs. And if those salespeople are not feeling comfortable about presenting an EV and know the benefits of driving an EV, they're not going to sell them. They're going to take that EV prospect and actually, in many cases, move them to an ICE vehicle. Right?
No, that's a great point. I've presented at NADA a couple times, and I've done some workshops on dealer readiness for EVs, and that was the main thing that I conveyed to your point, like experience it. Not only drive it, but experience having issues with getting charging if you don't have home charging, kind of those pain points, and really being able to live it and being able to tell that consumer what it's like to drive an EV. And also even, I think, driving one with the torque and like regenerative braking, being able to explain that, also charge all the things around that. So I think that's going to be key for, like, in the future for dealerships, to your point, to really have that experience to say firsthand what it's like to drive an EV.
Yeah, for sure.
Talk about any of those pain points.
Well, especially if the customer comes into the dealership and says, "Well, do you drive an EV?" And the salesperson says, "No, I don't drive an EV. Well, you're selling them, and you don't even drive one, and you want me to believe in it, and how come you haven't made that leap?" As many customers may ask, and now you're into a whole different part of this transaction that you shouldn't be in to begin with, right?
Right.
So so it's
interesting. Of that sales training, right? Like, you get it for a couple weeks, and then I think the other thing too, I think this is from a dealer perspective too, having community engagement, right? Dealers are like stellar community members, having lunch and learns and actually have their sales staff be part of that. And so you're educating your staff, you're engaging the community, you partner with the utility. I think there's some creative, localized strategies that dealers can use to really create more awareness and educate their staff and consumers at the same time. Yeah,
I agree. Tesla once dominated the EV market. We talked a little bit about it, but that's starting to change now. Which automakers were the largest movers in the U.S. EV market for the first half of 2025?
Yeah, definitely GM.
GM.
GM, I think their strategy of having like this broad portfolio across segments,
Yeah.
across luxury, non-luxury. And once again, we mentioned the Equinox. I mean, that just is doing so well. And also the other brands like Silverado and the Cadillac, some of the optic lyrics. So I think they've really done well this first half.
Hmm.
The other one is Honda Group with the Prologue and the ZDX. I think they've done really well with those.
Okay.
And definitely they've been aggressive in their incentives on those vehicles. So I think that's helped push some of it as well.
Hmm.
But they've done well. And I think Stellantis, which I know is a newcomer to EV, so we'll see how they end up, but
Yeah.
definitely having some product, they're gaining some traction as well.
Yeah.
So I think those are for the first half. And then I think looking at, you mentioned Tesla, Tesla just hasn't had any products, right? They've had the Cybertruck,
Yeah.
which is very niche, and they've given up their competitive advantage, opening up their network, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
I think that's good for the industry having standardization.
That's right.
Um,
That's right. Yeah.
right. And then they also, I think, Elon has been very polarizing. I think that could impact some of the brand.
Oh yeah.
So I think Tesla's had some major headwinds. The one thing I will say about Tesla, though, is that, they are profitable because they have that vertical integration. So I
Hmm.
think that's going to be key for longer term manufacturers to really build up that supply chain, get economies of scale.
Hmm.
So I think, yeah, so Tesla has fallen behind. Their shares about 44% for the year. And definitely GM, Honda, some of these other brands are starting to eat at that.
Yeah. Yeah. As part of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, the federal EV tax credits are expiring after June 30th. What changes do you expect to see in the EV market due to these governmental-backed tax incentives that are going to be going away? I mean, obviously, we touched on it a little bit earlier where it might be the tsunami of sales for EVs, right?
Right, right. The training wheels are coming off, and I think it's this policy-induced, change, which I think at the end of the day creates innovation, right? Because we need to have once again the price parity for EVs with ICE.
Yeah.
But definitely, I think Q3 we'll see an uptick, and then going into Q4 probably slow down.
Hmm.
Last year we had forecasted that EVs would make up 10% of the market in 2025.
Hmm.
And so each month we kind of looking at it, adjusting it.
Yeah.
And so right now we're thinking about 8.5% market share, and that's pretty much flat. Year to date, we're about 1.5% growth. So we're probably maybe 1.5%, 4% growth. So
Okay.
not a lot of change year to year. And then I think it's just going to be interesting to see how manufacturers react with incentives. How do those states that have state incentives, are they
Hmm.
going to really kind of leverage those to keep more momentum in some of those states? So we might see adoption continue to vary state by state, which we
Hmm.
currently see now.
Sure, sure. Since all the new cars turn into used ones, as we know, we finally have a significant pool of used EVs out there in the marketplace. How is the used EV market performing in the U.S. so far?
Yeah, the used market is that shiny star, I think. Q2 was a record 100,000 used EVs were sold. And I know it's granted it's a small, like 2% of the overall used market.
Hmm.
But I think we're going to continue to see growth in the used market. It'll be a record year, maybe close to 380,000 will be sold.
Okay.
And that's going to be probably like a 35% year over year growth. And I think the used market, as we talked about with those leased vehicles, leasing is across the board. So used EVs are going to come in all different sizes, segments, price points. And so for those consumers who are interested in EV and want something that's affordable, used EV is going to be the way to go. In fact, the last few months, the price difference between a used EV and a used ICE has been less than 2,000. And so that's once again talking about that barrier for used or for new vehicles. Once you get that price parity, that can really be a game changer, which we've seen, China, which dominates, right? In China, there's a lot of other reasons why they have those low price EVs, but that's what's been helpful there. You can buy an EV for less than a gas vehicle. And so I think used EVs are going to be really important for consumers who are looking for something that's affordable. And then if they are able to live in a place where they can charge at home, low electricity rates, that total cost of ownership is really going to start to shine and be a really strong value proposition.
Right, right, right. And all of this is as we wait for the Chinese to come in with their very high quality, low cost EVs into the United
Yeah.
States. Don't know when that's going to happen, but I'm sure it's going to happen, right?
Right, right. Kind of like I used to work at Nissan. You look the way that the Japanese came in, the Koreans.
Yep.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with all that. But
That's right.
lots
That's
lots to watch
Yeah.
in this EV area.
No, there's no question about it. It's going to be the EV saga continues now as we go
Yes.
back and say, well, ICE vehicles aren't so bad, and maybe EVs aren't our future entirely. And it's just the consumer. It's just like, wait a minute, I thought we were all EVs. No, we're not all EVs. We're going backwards on that, and dealers are doing the same thing, and OEMs are trying to get their hands around this EV situation. Now the tax thing's going away, and it's crazy.
Yeah,
Stephanie,
yeah, a lot of confusion. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Stephanie Valdez Streaty, who's the Director of Industry Insights at Cox Automotive. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. I know that our viewers get a lot out of this kind of content specifically, so thanks so much for sharing. And love to have you back to take out some other areas of the report that the time doesn't allow us to
We
get
just
to
talk about
today.
hybrids and plug-ins, which are kind of fill in those gaps, I think.
That's right. I think Toyota got it right because they said, we're going to do more of the hybrid and the plug-ins before we go all EV. And of course, that is what's leading the charge, right?
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
All right, you
Bye.
too.